Thank you very much. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. So just to understand your position, Ms. Levin, do you think that private schools should be abolished?
No, I do not.
Okay, because you referred to my colleague's line of questioning as an ad hominem attack, but I think that totally misses the point. You think that your parents are well within their rights to send you to a private school that costs tens of thousands of dollars in tuition.
At their own expense, yes.
And you support the right of Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, Joe Biden to send their child to private school.
I'm an attorney and the law supports their right, and I support it as well.
Okay, so you support the right of families to choose private schools if they can afford it. Is that right?
That's correct. I do believe that public education, though, is the cornerstone of our democracy, and I, as an individual, firmly support it.
Okay, but do you see how that might rub some people the wrong way when you support school choice for wealthy families but oppose efforts to extend that same opportunity to lower income families?
Because I believe that our public schools should be as well-funded and as wonderful as our private schools, I think that that is something that the American people widely agree on. But policymakers need to find the political will to finally fully fund our public schools and the evidence-backed programs that help all students in places that welcome all students.
So you talked about rural schools. Let's say that you are in one of these rural communities that only has one public school, and unfortunately, it's not very good. What would you tell the parents in that community?
I would advocate alongside them, as we do, for better public funding for their public schools.
Okay, and maybe that'll solve the problem, maybe it won't. Meanwhile, their child isn't being taught to read. You just tell them tough luck?
No, I, as an attorney, would advocate for their rights under the law, which I would note largely do not apply to private school students.
Okay, and you think that that's going to somehow instantly transform this school so that they're taught to read?
I think that there's no chance of people's rights being enforced when they don't have them.
Let's think about Arizona, Ms. Clark, if you're a parent in that same situation. So this is their sort of example that's come up again and again. What about in a rural community? If you are in this situation where there's really only one public school and you have access to an ESA, what are your options then?
Well, we have thousands of families in Arizona in rural communities who are utilizing our state's ESA program, and they're utilizing it because it works. They're not trapped by maybe one public school that isn't serving them well, maybe isn't teaching their child to read. They can launch a micro school, they can create a co-op, they could hire a teacher and pool their ESA funds with other families, which many of them have done. They can do online schools. There's thousands of incredible online schools. They would have access to all of those things with an ESA.
What do you think, Ms. Levin? Might that get you better results in the near term than writing a letter to your state legislator?
The research says that it would not. The overwhelming research shows that online schools do not perform as well as brick and mortar schools, particularly for our most vulnerable.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, Dr. McShane gave us a lot of research that says quite the contrary. But I mean, you're from California, and you've told us again that the solution is just full funding. California is pretty well funded. How's California doing with education?
The solution, to be clear, is not just full funding.
Okay.
Full funding is a necessary, though not a sufficient, condition for an adequate education.
Okay, what are the other things?
We need policy. We need to fund policies that are evidence-backed and that work.
Like what?
Like teacher preparation, like preschool, like sufficient services for students with disabilities. And I'd be happy to provide the committee with much more research-backed evidence.
Okay, so in California, we're not doing well. You didn't answer the question, but that's the truth. So I guess even though we have all that funding, we just don't have the right policies in those other areas? Is that what it is?
Well, California has improved its public school funding. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has sufficient funding to serve the needs well of every student.
Are you aware that California had the longest school shutdown in the country during COVID? Do
I will take your word for it.
you think that was a good thing, or was that a mistake?
I believe that during a catastrophic early years of a pandemic, that schools sometimes needed to stay closed to protect both students, especially students with disabilities.
So you support California's decision to have its schools closed longer than any state in the country?
I support the decision of each state and locality in making the choice that was right for them.
Okay, interesting. But you don't support that when it comes to issues like school choice?
When it comes to issues like school choice, I support the policies that are going to benefit students, not harm them, and the evidence is overwhelming.
Well, the evidence is overwhelming that school closures harm students. That's not even really up for debate at this point. You are a supporter of charter schools, though, is that right?
Yes, though they have to be, like all public policy, implemented well, designed well, and with safeguards to protect students' rights.
Okay, so when President Biden tried to cut federal charter school grants, did you speak out against that?
Well, President Biden was a little more targeted than I think you're characterizing. For example, I do not support, an education law center does not support for-profit charter schools. They should not be funded with federal money.
And just for the record, do federal civil rights laws apply to private schools, yes or no?
Largely not.
Federal civil rights laws, you're saying do not apply to private schools?
Largely not. Some provisions do, but many do not, of IDEA, Title VI, the EEOA, Title IX. Some of them only apply, many of them only apply to schools that receive federal funding, which is an increasingly low number of private schools, especially high schools.
That's largely untrue. There's a federal, for any employer, there are federal civil rights protections that don't depend on whether you're a public or private